This is Gail Morgan welcoming you to the Libertarian Counterpoint. Now, your host, James Just.
And thank you for joining me today. With me is John Cameron in the middle today and Richard Fields down on the other end. All right, gentlemen, we're going to start out with a simple question. Does science have a God complex? And the question I'm asking this is because there's a mission to bring back the woolly mammoth. And the claim that repopulating the woolly mammoth is going to prevent global warming by somehow making the permafrost stay frozen. I don't understand what the logic is behind that, but
Hold on. I have an answer to that. Wait a second.
Yeah. Well, of course, some tech billionaires got together with some crazy scientists, and of course, so now they're going to try to regrow a woolly mammoth. But the question is, if we're accidentally, humans by their natural activities, accidentally changing the environment, what makes us think we should be deliberately altering the environment? Some of this stuff makes no sense to me.
Well, I think that recreating a woolly mammoth in the lab, I think is a wonderful idea. I think using the excuse of I think we should have woolly mammoths. I think we should have Tyrannosaurus Rex. I think we should have pterodactyls. I think we should have Goldwater Republicans. I'm just all the stuff out of the past that's either entertaining or useful. I think we should bring back. And if we can do it in a lab, I mean, we're now suffering from, a pandemic caused by something.
Well, they made a movie about that, Jurassic Park, I think it was.
Jurassic Park, yeah. Well, the thing
it didn't work out all that well in the end, but.
Well, no, but that'll never happen again because accidents never happen. Experiments always go right, especially gain of function experiments. Anyway, so what's hilarious about the news story, that one of the news stories that brought this out, is that they're saying that woolly mammoths will prevent global warming. And here's the reasoning: that in the past, the tundra was grasslands, and grasslands are better carbon sinks than forests, because of the dark trunks on conifers. I guess they forget that there's also needles and things that are green, but it's all a lie, because the reasoning is that all the forests are burning down because of global warming, which is also a lie. They're burning down because of poor forestry management that nobody wants to take credit for. And grasslands hold carbon in their root structure. So even if the grass burns off, the carbon is still held under the root structure. But the simple solution to that is trees. Trees hold way more carbon than grassland. If you ever want to do the math, figure out how much like a quarter acre of grass takes in water versus a tree, quarter acre of trees. And so, the thinking only holds if all the forests burn down. And the other thing they're talking about is that these mammoths, by tramping down on the snow, will impact it. And that will also make the permafrost not melt, because it's melting all over the place. And by crashing through these forests, they'll knock down the little seedlings, the saplings of trees, and allow the grass to grow. So I don't know what they were smoking, but I'm sure it indeed came out of a lab, or at least when it was grown, it was modified in a lab. So if you take that reasoning, that trees, by their dark nature, don't reflect as much light back into the atmosphere to escape the Earth, then why are you in favor of a couple million acres of black solar panels covering the planet.
We got John started on this whole global warming climate thing. I was poking fun at that scientists, getting this big
I'm
ego.
talking
The interesting thing about this is the marketing on it. They're calling it a woolly mammoth, but what they're really talking about is doing some genetic modification on an tropical Asian elephant to make it more adaptive to cold weather. It's not going to be a woolly mammoth. It's going to be an Asian elephant that can with an extra layer of blubber or something. I'm not sure exactly what they're, how they think this is going to work.
It's going to be
I'm going to guess that it's not going to work very well. Remember Dolly the sheep?
Yeah.
Dolly the sheep didn't do so well.
No,
Well,
it's the hubris of science that we're experiencing on a day-to-day basis here nowadays, right? That they think, well, just because we can do something means we should do something, means it's always good, and then if you complain about it, well, sit down and shut up. It's like,
well, I don't have any problem with them doing their little experiment. I'm just making a prediction that it's not going to work out in the way that they expect it to. Certainly not when it comes to global warming. That's just after the fact justification.
Yeah,
that's exactly what that is. That's just justification, trying to sell it to somebody. I'm sorry, John.
No, it's the reasoning that the what's the word I'm looking for? Kafkaesque. That's the wrong word. Just the bizarre logic that people use, and they skip right over, the most important part of whatever they're arguing about, and go right to global warming. Or we're going to talk about some other stuff.
Yeah, they want to play around with science, and they want to play around with genetic engineering, and they're experimenting on this thing, and that's all great. That's all fine. But just say that. Don't kind of push into this global warming nonsense. But talk about hubris and the God complex. The government, don't show up the government. Down in VALLEJO, pothole vigilantes have been issued a stop work order from the city because, well, you can't show the city up. You can't have a bunch of 3-4 guys out there in a crew filling potholes when the city can't do it. So the city is now making these guys, trying to get these guys to stop. Of course, they're not going to stop. They've already said they're not going to stop. They're going to go around filling potholes. But talk about priorities or a lack thereof. You're going to send.
Well, what's interesting to me is the city's excuse. They're worried that the tar, which is, I'm sure, highly viscous and will run off wherever, is going to cause some sort of an environmental problem. Well, they're not using ingredients that meet up to the high standards of City of Vallejo specs for filling potholes. Well, come on. This is just government bureaucrats exercising their authority because they can, and ignoring the needs and the wishes of the populace who don't want to wreck their cars every time they drive down the street.
If they're so worried about the potholes, then fill them. If not, or if you're so worried about it, give them the materials. Say, hey, here's some materials. Go out and fill some potholes.
No, you couldn't do that, because if these people don't fill these potholes properly according to spec, then during rains, this poorly machined asphalt, poorly put in asphalt will lift up from the surface of the road, and it might drop into a storm drain, create flooding, and the city will be liable for it. You can't have them be liable for things. But except for why don't we?
No, it really comes down to, we have some union jobs in the city maintenance department that we have to protect at all costs. That's what I think. Ultimately,
I was being sarcastic. I agree with all of you guys. It's crazy that the governments at all levels completely refuse to do their job, yet insist upon a mission which has never been given them, which is social engineering. And so you have cities that are unsafe. You have rampant crime. You have potholes in the street that destroy cars and cause accidents. I don't know if you're anybody on a motorcycle, you ever hit a bad pothole, unless you're lined up for it perfectly, you're going to go down. And so it's ridiculous that if the populace wants to step in and do the job that all these government agencies and feels like billions of government employees refuse to do and are stopped, it's just another straw on that poor crushed camel's back. That camel's only about that high now because it's been crushed, just crushed.
Yeah. Well, and we'll kind of move on, talk about jobs. A Quinnipiac poll that shows Biden's approval rating is down to 33%. Now, a lot of people want to make simple reasons why, but the reality is there's highly complex reasons why. You've got the progressive side of the Democrat Party. He's all mad that hasn't managed to shove their agenda through. Then you've got the rest of us who are all kind of mad that, the job market is in upheaval. The mandates, some people are mad at mandates. Some people are mad that you don't have more mandates. You've got this crazy all mess. And then you've got this inflation monster kind of hovering above all of this thing. And it's no surprise to me that this guy who can't communicate properly and has zero leadership skills now, if he ever did, has no leadership. No one wants to follow him. Well,
yeah, I think his approval ratings are lower than Nixon's were at Watergate, or approaching an all-time low for all presidents, including Jimmy Carter, Richard Nixon, and Donald Trump at his worst. But the thing is, the inflation bugaboo, I think, is probably what's coming back to bite him the most. Everybody, when they go to the grocery store or go to the gas pump or go to the hardware store or try to buy a house, they are staring at the inflation monster directly in the face, or the monster staring them in the face, and there's not a darn thing any of us can do about it. Very few people realize the actual cause of inflation, but you got to kind of feel sorry for old, poor slow Joe, because inflation was started under the Trump administration, and before that by the Bush administration and the Obama administration, when the government pumped up the money, the Fed, a quasi-government agency, pumped up the money supply with abandon, supposedly to fight the pandemic or to remedy the problems caused by the government lockdown response to the pandemic. Well, nobody, we're not going to let business produce anything, so that's going to reduce incomes, reduce money in the economy. So we'll just create money and throw that into the economy. Well, you've got more money, less supply, prices go up. It's Econ 101, or at least before the Keynesians and the
not even Econ 101, Richard. That's Econ 1. It's not even Econ 101.
I was thinking,
it's just absolutely insane. I mean, I've been reading in MSNBC, in the Washington Post, all of these so-called news organizations are putting out analysis pieces saying, what's the cause of inflation? Is it because grocery stores are greedy and they're raising their prices so that they have a 1% margin instead of a 0.9% margin? Is it the food processors because they've got a monopoly? It's none of those things. I mean, they may be minor contributing factors, but the cause of inflation is and always has been money supply growth without the corresponding supply in the amount of goods and services provided. It's just so simple. Unfortunately, fortunately for me, I lived through the 70s when we saw the same phenomena. But most people are younger than I am and don't remember the rampant inflation that was caused or cured by Paul Volcker. They don't even know who Paul Volcker is. And unless we get a Paul Volcker and his name is not Jerome Powell, we're going to have inflation, and it's going to continue for a while. Okay, that's my rant on inflation. Going back to poor Joe Biden, well, he's kowtowing to the left entirely, to the progressive left, with all of his Build It Back Better programs. It's the Green New Deal. It's subsidies to everybody under the world. It's changing the voting laws so the Democrats have free reign to count the votes, I think is the polite way of putting it. However they want to count the votes. It's not, as Lenin said, it doesn't matter who votes, it matters who counts the votes.
Yeah, I'm going to add some fuel to Richard's rant here. But what's upsetting to me is how effectively the organs of state propaganda, the MSNBCs and the New York Times and CNN and all the rest of them are very carefully not reporting on what is obvious to anyone who's ever read and sat in an econ 101 class, because I don't think they ever want to call it one, because that would make it too small. 101's a college course. One is, I wish they teach basic. No, never mind, because I know what kind of economics they teach in grade school. It would be socialism. But the basic problem is, again, the money supply. And the reason they're not talking about the basic problem is then the great mass of people who keep their heads down and hope that the government doesn't pick on them might stick their heads up and say, wait a minute, you guys have caused this. The people in government have done this. It's not the fault of these people down in the grocery store, the people who are drilling for oil, or the people who are making cars or selling us those nice computers that, do now for $1,000 what you couldn't get for 15 years ago for 10 million. It's not those people. They're the good people. It's the government that's the bad people, and the banksters. We can't have that, so they're not talking about it.
And the other part of it is the cure to inflation is lowering the money supply, which means ending quantitative easing, which is a polite way of saying for the Fed to say, okay, we'll print up trillions or billions of dollars worth of money and use it to buy distressed government and corporate bonds so that interest rates don't go up, controlling interest rates at the source over in the overnight market on the short term, in the long term by buying bonds. If that happens, both the bond market and the stock market will take a tumble. Who owns most of the bonds and the stocks? It is the elites and their friends in government. They are bound and determined to keep their gravy train going just as long as they possibly can. Most of them realize it won't go on forever, and they'll ultimately switch their assets to gold or Bitcoin or something that can hold its value. But for the time being, they want to make sure that the asset bubble, which is where inflation has gone or did go up until the most recent, up until the last year, most inflation ended up in assets. Now it's ended up in actual consumer goods. The elites are worried, and they should be worried, but they still want to keep that asset bubble going, because otherwise they would lose money big time. It's a vicious circle, and the Fed is, even if they wanted to do the right thing, it would be very difficult for them to do so and maintain their independence, so-called.
Well, and there's two other factors, I think, driving down Biden's numbers. Is you've got one, the narrative that shall not be named is falling apart, and there's so many people who have essentially spent the last 2 years chanting that narrative over and over again as it's falling apart in front of them. Of course, someone who's championing that narrative is going to take a hit with that. And then the second one is, I don't understand what the progressive left can get. They can't get, the center of their own party to agree with them, but yet somehow they think if we just get this stuff passed, the rest of the country is going to somehow magically agree with them. And, these people are kind of delusional. And so, if Biden wasn't such a political hack, I'd feel bad for him. But, you reap what you sow over the course of his career. He's kind of, created this mess for himself. And in a sense, I feel bad because I think he's probably should not be in this position where he is. He's being used by the establishment. He's a figurehead being used by the establishment more than he's being president himself. And it's kind of sad.
Go ahead, James. Sorry.
No, I just find it kind of sad. I really didn't have anything to go after that. It's just kind of sad.
On the one hand, we've been kind of conditioned to think about, popular presidents getting their agenda done. But as a libertarian, what I want is an incompetent stooge as a president, and not a stooge because he's somebody else's stooge, and a whole bunch of incompetence in all houses of Congress disagreeing with each other. And occasionally when they've come to some kind of conclusion to do something really, really wrong, an objective Supreme Court that will rein them in. And now we've got quasi-objective Supreme Court. At least they pay attention to parts of the Constitution. We have an incompetent as president, and we have seen how bad Congress is. So we might get to the point where inadvertently government creates a libertarian state by being completely incompetent in all places. The only problem with that is the deep state is still there, and they're heinously efficient and effective at controlling and maintaining power and crushing any hint of resistance on the part of the American people. So that's the fourth part of government that I don't quite know how to deal with. If you guys got any ideas, just let me know. Anyway.
Wish I did.
But there is one
That's
idea,
fine.
and I think some people have used it. U-Haul has run out of trucks leaving California. They're out of trucks. People have decided that the way to deal with it is to just leave, just voting with their feet, so to speak. Now, I feel bad for some of these places like Texas and Tennessee, because you got a bunch of Californians going over there, and even the people who in California are center in Texas and Tennessee are going to be far left. And so, there's the rest of the world, we don't kind of know what they're getting into in a sense. But we're also losing a lot of our libertarian community. A lot of our libertarian people they're leaving. They're going to greener pastures, or pastures that are less brown, I guess is what we could say. And it's a sad thing because our communities are disintegrating, and that's just another sign of, the incompetence of the leadership. What I was noticing, everything in California is broken except the tax collection, which shows you where their categories are. Our tax collecting budget, it's booming through the roof, right? We've got record amounts of money. Everything else is broken. Potholes can't get filled. We have pothole vigilantes, but yet the government has lots of money, but nothing works.
Oh, and the same thing, record amounts of money being spent in our government-run school districts, and we have some of the least educated students in the country. And I'm still dialing in the joke. Richard didn't like it. Let me see if I could dial it in a little better. And one of the leading special interest group is the California Teachers Association, which is responsible for a whole new meaning of the phrase "California grows the most vegetables in the country." It's still not working, but I'll get it there. I'll get that joke there. I promise I'm going to work on it and work on it. And one of these days it'll get a laugh. So
one of these days, well, you're getting a laugh, John. It's just not for the right reasons.
Yeah,
it's a groan, John, but that's okay.
Yeah. Well, the groan is just, if people groan or laugh, at least they're listening. But the point is that this state is self-destructing. And if it wasn't for Silicon Valley propping it up, because that's where most of the tax revenue is coming from, all these multimillionaires and billionaires in Silicon Valley, we'd be upside down. But now with the COVID stuff and all the rest of that, a lot of these Silicon Valley types are learning that they can basically move to paradise, and with a good enough internet connection and a reasonably close airport, they don't have to deal with traffic jams in Silicon Valley, and they can sell their $1.2 million 2-bedroom 2-bath house in Silicon Valley, or in the case of a lot of these people, their $10 million house in Silicon Valley, and go buy a country somewhere else. So eventually the Elon Musks and the Intels and all the rest of that are going to pull everybody else with them, and then it's going to be very interesting. It's going to be very interesting in the state of California when their major revenue stream does not exist.
California will probably become more welcoming to immigrants at that point because of just to replace the lost population, if nothing else.
Yeah, but if they're not replacing the economic activity, if they're replacing high-end economic activity.
Oh, I tell you what, immigrants will replace the lost economic activity. The most entrepreneurial people in this country today are, in fact, immigrants. Take a look at who all of the movers and shakers, or many of the movers and shakers in Silicon Valley are. They're immigrants.
Yeah, but if they're being strangled by the same regulations that are pushing people out, how long will it last? Are they going to stay? Or are they going to go? They're going to go too.
Well,
Why would they stay?
Where the opportunity is, but I don't know what to say long term about California. If it wasn't for Silicon Valley and the glorious natural beauty that the ineffective government here has done its best to destroy and keep people out of, nobody would want to live here. I mean, it's a mess, and it's going to keep getting worse. And I know we don't have much time, but I thought we were going to cover a couple other things. But
no, we're gonna turn this into the last minute and a half or whatever to the John Cameron Show. John, it says here the world is getting cooler. Was cooler in 2021 than 2020, and they say that's not good news. Somehow, I thought the world getting hot was bad news, but now it's getting cooler and it's not good news. I don't know anymore. I think these people are just making stuff up as they go along, to be honest, at this point.
Well, I don't know. The John Cameron Show is going to be very short today. Anybody who wants to read just a bizarre, I hate to give, should I even give a plug to them? They do some interesting tech articles, but there's one of these circuitous, whatever you call it, circular reasoning articles about the world not being as hot in 2021 as it was in 2020, and why this is not necessarily a good thing. And none of the reasoning is talking about, well, it's because of the shutdown, there was less aerosols released, and aerosols reflect heat back into the atmosphere. It was El Nino or La Nina or El Mujer or La Hermosa. I don't know what they call it. And basically it was just, and then they kept quoting this radical left eco group out of Berkeley called Berkeley Earth or something like that. And they're numbers. And everybody knows that the numbers that NASA quotes and all these other people quotes are fudged. They selectively they even out statistics and remove weather stations that don't report what they want and all the rest of that. So it's going to be very interesting when it snows in Palm Beach, how they're going to explain that global warming caused that when we're heading into the Maunder minimum. So I don't know. It's just,
well, I think probably we are experiencing a little bit of global warming, but I say, who cares? It'll work to the benefit of people who live in Canada, Siberia, and Alaska. It won't be so happy a time for people who live in Brazil, but I'm also in favor of open migration. Move to where the climate is nice. That's my theory.
I'm all for wanting to live cleaner. Whether I don't care, whether that makes the environment warmer, cooler. The environment's going to do what it's going to do. And for whatever reasons, because we're here or not, it's going to change. And I would want to live cleaner. And I think that should be our one of our main goals.
Yeah,
we are I think we are just about out of time. I want to thank you, gentlemen, for being here. I want to thank Access Sacramento for giving us the opportunities. I want to thank our producer, Gail Morgan, for all the work he does behind the scenes. And I want to thank all of our viewers and listeners for watching and listening. And please remember to love everybody.
And forgive us for all of the hot air that we produce.
Yeah, I've been especially careful not to produce